A wound that penetrates the rib cage and lets air into the right pleural cavity stops airflow into the right lung because the what? So remember that the way the respiratory cycle works is that if we consider the thoracic cavity, which I'll draw like this, where you have the two lungs and then the heart between them, but I won't draw that. The diaphragm is down here, so this is a muscle. And during inhalation or the inspiratory phase of the respiratory cycle, what happens is that the diaphragm, when it contracts, it moves downward. Okay? And since it moves downward, this is what happens, right? The thoracic cavity basically becomes larger, right? So the volume of that increases. And that actually helps the lungs to expand. So the lungs expand as the thoracic wall expands, okay? And the diaphragm contracts. And the volume in the lungs becomes greater, okay? And as a result, the pressure drops. And that allows for air to basically come from the outside, right? And be sucked into the lungs, right? So it's following a pressure gradient, right? Now, this all depends on the lungs being able to expand during inspiration and then during expiration to contract. So the volume decreases and that reverses the pressure gradient, so air is driven out. So the respiratory cycle actually depends on these pressure changes and these volume changes. Now, the space between the thoracic wall and the surface of the lung is called the pleural space, or the pleural cavity, okay? And so as it turns out, the pressure in the pleural cavity is a negative pressure relative to the pressure inside the lungs. And that's actually what allows the lungs to remain expanded and actually undergo these volume changes. However, if the chest wall is compromised, like there's a cut or something like that, and air gets in, so air starts to move in, then the pressure in the atmosphere equilibrates with the pleural cavity pressure, and that will prevent the lungs from expanding anymore, okay? And so you are not going to be able to inhale air because you're not able to change the volume of the lungs anymore, and therefore you can't instigate that pressure change, all right? And so this is actually going to result in a situation called a pneumothorax, okay? And the lung cannot be expanded anymore, right? So all these answer choices, A is going to be the correct answer, right? Now, if the air also then gets trapped there, so it gets in but it can't get out, that could actually compress the lung. And since the heart is located between the two lungs right here, it could actually push on the heart, which will basically prevent the heart from getting filled with blood. And that can lead to obstructive shock, okay, and a very rapid decline in blood pressure and cardiac output and potentially death. And that is called a tension pneumothorax.